Hello, I'm Mark Brohan, Senior Vice President, B2B and Market Research at Digital Commerce 360, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. Today, I am joined by a very eminent panel, and we're going to tie into and break down some very top-of-mind things out there having to do with B2B digital commerce and product discovery and how AI ties into this. And believe you me, this is resonating with B2B and buyers and sellers up and down the line. So we have Eric Shumway from Lucidworks, we have Rick Lockwood from CDW, and we have Eric Immerman from Proficient. And each of our panelists are going to tell you a little bit about their background and perspective on the topics here as we kind of get into our first series of questions here. So Eric or Andrew, we're going to start with you, which is in-house implementation is very much top of mind today. You know, do it yourself, outsource it, combine it. People have questions on that. So here's the question and let's talk a little bit about your background here too. How feasible is it for companies to develop their own AI search solution in-house? And then follow up, what resources and expertise are required to make a successful endeavor? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, thank you. So first, a little intro. My name is Andrew Shumway. I'm a principal solution architect at Lucidworks. My expertise tends to be in the search and newer AI technologies, and this is at the implementation and nuts and bolts level, not a higher view strategy type thing, but more this is how we do it. Now, Lucidworks itself, my employer, we offer various ways, premier ways for large businesses to create sustainable advantage through search and experience management. Along with search offerings, we incorporate AI and machine learning to intelligently ingest, explore, and curate. So this is not just our use of them, but our exposing the ability to use those technologies within the search experience. This can be deployed on-prem, self-hosted, public cloud, or managed by Lucidworks in multi-tenant cloud platform as a service. Now to your question about hosting yourself, hosting AI services yourself. If by that you mean you want to host your own large language model, that tends to be a pretty high bar. Lots of compute power, lots of memory needed, lots of expertise in hosting. But you get the model from somewhere else. It could be an open source model, etc. The bar is fairly high. Usually the better thing, the more common thing that I see is people say, we are going to use a large language model from a provider of some sort. This might be OpenAI, this might be Microsoft's hosting of OpenAI, this might be the Lucidworks AI capability, which is model agnostic and will let you use any of those, Google Gemini, etc., or we self-host some. That gets you access to the large language model. The next question is, how do you use it? And that's where the expertise needs to come in. You need to know people, have people who can know your business and know your processing well enough that they can, and also know large language models, their capabilities, their pros, their cons, to be able to see where they can fit together with leverage to either automate things, to improve data quality, to perhaps go right in front of the customer and answer questions. But there are caveats to each of those situations, and you need to have people that can understand that for you.
Anyway, now, Eric, I'm sorry. Okay. Eric, I want to talk to you next about a couple things here, and I want you to kind of maybe broaden just a little bit of perspective on this, which is because you see a lot of this going on both maybe the buyer side for what they want and on the seller side for what the expectations are with a technology like this. You know, a SaaS-based model has kind of changed everything the last several years. So has the cloud, to make it much more malleable, much more easier. Well, maybe that's not the term, but much more. There's more flexibility now to kind of implement this kind of new, frankly, very new kind of specific use of AI as it applies to a specific function like personalization and site search. So search in any form is not new to anybody, but how to effectively use the AI thing to get what's right for your organization, let alone the ROI. Now that's a secret of the sauce a lot of folks are having maybe some questions about. So I know it's a little long-winded, but what I'm asking you is, are you seeing more in-house implementation? Are you seeing more complete outsourcing because it might be a SaaS-based model? Or are you seeing a blended approach? And even if it's all three, what's your forecast on how you see this kind of maybe playing out over the next 18 months or so? How's that for a long question?
Perfect, that works. So quick introduction, my name's Eric Immerman. I run our search practice here at Proficient. I've got a team of probably 100 people. All we do is focus on search and how to use AI in search to kind of drive outcomes, right? I'm going to take a step back on your question. I'm going to position it in a certain way, right? So the question here for a lot of organizations comes for, do I want to build or buy? Right? If I build, I'm going to have a cheaper end run licensing, but there's probably more build up front. If I buy, I'm going to spend more licensing over time, but it's easier for me to build up front. The balance here actually isn't often as much in the technology, because the ability to do this from a pure technology perspective isn't, it's not a secret hieroglyphic sort of thing that nobody can understand, right? Folks can understand kind of the approach for how do I bring in clickstream data, how do I build models, et cetera. The problem is most companies' view of search and what is search and personalization tends to start from basically, I want to check the box, right? I have to have query suggestions. I have to get search results back. I have to have filters and facets. And the problem that most organizations fail to realize is that there's different levels of each of those, right? Query suggestions can be suggest the word you're trying to type, or it can be suggest the phrase you're trying to type, or it can be use AI to suggest what's the most likely thought you're trying to type, or use AI to predict based on every other user, what is the thing this user is most expected to type next, even if the character they're typing is like the 30th character of that sentence, right? Each of those are the same feature, but implemented to a vastly different degree, right? And so what we often find when companies are making this decision, the rabbit hole they fall down on term of build it themselves is, okay, we can, for a relatively straightforward cost, get all the features, check all the boxes, right? But we're still not as good as the next guy, right? What do I have to do to get better and get to the same level as the next guy, right? And the challenge for everybody in this industry at the end of the day is that your competitor from mindshare and what people expect in this is Google, right? There are very few organizations that have hundreds of billions of dollars to spend on search research to make the preeminent search and great experience in the world. But you still have to hit that level of quality for people not to say, oh, this search doesn't work very well, right? And so the challenge that we often find is actually more on the business side of, if you're going to build it yourself, can you express a clear business value for why search is mission critical to your business and why it is a differentiator for your organization, right? Search, personalization, product discovery, all come into this search word that I'm using to be clear, right? The second is going to be, can I create investment in this as a program and not a project? Right? Because if I do this as a project, I'm going to hit all those features and then I'm never going to get any better, right? But if I do it as a program, well, then I can keep investing and keep improving, and I can do a really, really good job over time via just persistence of implementing this, right? The third is going to be, do I actually have it fully scoped what is needed for this platform, right? Everybody says, okay, I'm going to go implement search and discovery. Let me grab one of those open source platforms out there. But that's like a 15th of the total size of what you need here, right? I need a lexical index, a semantic index. I need a large language model. I need analytics tracking. I need an admin interface. I need connectors. I need machine learning models. I need all of these things that maybe aren't classified as search in many people's minds, but they're part of the full platform that you have to build. And because of that, what companies are running into is they'll hit that checkbox mark and either decide, I want to keep investing in building it myself, or wait a second, this is harder than I thought. Let me go out to the market and invest in a company that is investing in this for me.
And I see Rick shaking his head here. And Rick, I want to kind of pivot to you next, because if you don't know who CDW and Rick Lockwood are, you should, because they are preeminent in the information technology, applications and services business. We know them well because they're here in our hometown of Chicago. We've known you for many, many years. But Rick, your perspective, I think, is very unique because of a couple of things. First off, you're in the technology business, so you offer a lot of technology applications and services to a very, what's my point? You sell the tech, the tech guys are your customers. They know what they want. They know how they want it. And the thing is,
They do.
if you could talk about that. So they've got a slightly different take on product discovery and site search because of who they are, because there's a lot of tech folks anyway. But what's your perspective here about AI and in-house versus a blended approach versus a total outsource? Because I have always found that what you guys do over there in IT distribution is a bellwether for how other B2B companies eventually down the line adopt what you folks are. So, the IT buyers always got to come on the curve of this. So, long-winded, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, a little bit of an introduction. I have been in the Chicagoland area and working at a couple B2C and B2B providers, and have been able to go from both, completely outsourced to completely in-house. And I think right now at CDW, we kind of have, the best of both worlds. So my role here at CDW is I manage our product management team that covers our what we call the purchase funnel, which is our e-commerce capabilities of find, search, cart, checkout, pricing and inventory. And then I also manage our digital merchandising team that's responsible for the product data and taxonomy, which is really the cornerstone of the search. So really happy to have those teams working together as close as they do to provide a great search experience for our customers. And, we start with that purchase, and we use this Lucidworks platform. And then there's a number of capabilities that we've built on top of that, including AI and different algorithms, different treatments to data that come into our index. Like Eric said, running this as a complete program, and I'm very fortunate to have, the developers in-house on our team that can help us with that and improve on what Lucidworks has given us.
Andrew, before we leave this topic, I have one more follow-up for you, which is, typically these days, the buyer of the application or the service for something like this, they want their provider, who they ultimately go with, to be more of a technical partner as opposed to just, follow customer service. So what advice do you have for that? So if people are out there kind of looking at different solutions and they kind of want to know how their provider will be their partner, from a technical standpoint, what would you advise them, do you think?
Well, it's so often that when we approach a problem from a technical perspective, very quickly it comes down to, what does your data look like? How clean is it? Where is it being sourced from? Is it being sourced from multiple places in very different? It's the very common data problem. And then you've got the problem of how representative of it is reality. If you don't have full control, I'd like my data to look like this, but it doesn't, it looks like this. Well, know those things, know the shortcomings, know the problems with the data, know the current syntax, because that's where a majority of the questions are going to be in this partner relationship. And you don't want a partner relationship where one side is saying, well, I need to understand where you're at, what your data is like, where the problems are more, and the other side saying, I don't know, please tell me. Then you just go back and forth. You waste a lot of time. So the more you know, the more you can come together on those roles. But there are definitely synergies that can be built. On one side, you've got the data expert, which tends to be the customer that owns the data. On the other side, you've got the person that's been implementing and has seen similar scenarios or similar use cases across multiple industries even, and maybe can pull together ideas and approaches that will help. So we want to use both of those and blend them.
I got to tell you, Andrew, I like how you roll, because that's the perfect segue to our next question here. And Rick, I want to pivot back to you, which is, I got to tell you, I have been around e-commerce and B2B for 20 plus years. And the more things change, the more things stay the same, the more things accelerate, the more it's the same old problems. And in this case, I want to talk data quality because Andrew was summing up very nicely our next question, which is data cleanup challenges. What best practices can organizations follow to clean up old, ununiform data to make it suitable for enhancing the customer search journey, especially with AI tools? I mean, if your data is a mess, you're going nowhere. But that seems to be a perennial problem with a lot of organizations out there. So if the new frontier is very sophisticated machine learning and AI applications directly to the user experience and discovery and site search, better get your act together. So what do you think is the best way to kind of do that, do you think?
Absolutely. Well, like I said, data is the cornerstone of a great search. And I've always said, garbage in, garbage out. It doesn't matter how smart the models are or how smart the search engine is. Having clean data really helps that end result. So we've done a couple of things that we've had some success with. Now, we'll get a lot of different manufacturers that sell through us, and sometimes their data is in different formats. And one of the things that we've had a lot of success with this year is using machine learning, data science, and AI to understand how to match those up and make them the same measurement. So if we're talking about a 27-inch monitor on our site and it's 27 in quotations, we can make all of the data that comes in from various manufacturers all meet that same, so that you only get one filter in the left navigation when you're looking to filter a monitor by size. And so, that's one way of doing it without having to go out to 25 different suppliers and ask them to change the data and the way they send it to us. And we've also come up with several different rules in terms of what the fill rate is on the data. And if it doesn't match a certain fill rate, we can actually kick that back to them and say, we can't have it on the site. It doesn't answer all the questions that a customer is going to have about the product. And generally, when that happens, they're pretty quick to get you new data to help.
So Eric, let's bring you in on this because obviously you've got a thing or two to know about search here. Here's my question to you. The whole data quality, good, bad, sideways question here, that's been around for a while, but we're talking AI here. So my question to you is, before you even think about using AI for product discovery or site search or even something a little more sophisticated downstream here, should you be looking at AI to help clean up your back-end data and make it uniform across all the back-end functions that need to flow into that platform to enable clean and faster and better and more personalized site search?
I'm not going to say you should be looking at it before. I'm going to say you should be looking at it in tandem. And the reason I'm going to say in tandem is because you can fundamentally, one of the things we see successful a lot of our customers is, I've got my product data, which is fundamentally what we're talking about here, but we can also infer a lot of data from other sources as well. So on a site like CDW, for example, Rick, you've got tons of users who are coming. You can capture clickstream data of everyone who's on that site, who's interacting, who's browsing, et cetera. I can capture that data in a very clean format because I control how I'm capturing it. I can know when this click happens, when this interaction happens, et cetera. While I'm using AI to clean up the back-end data, which I'm not minimizing the importance of, right? I fully agree with Rick's garbage in, garbage out comment. It's, the better the data you have from a product category, the better you're going to be no matter what, right? But I also can capture front-end data on who is clicking for what, who is interacting with what, who is buying what. And I can start using that as signals to the searcher algorithms, to the relevancy algorithms to say, move this higher, move this lower, even if the product data isn't very good, right? Somebody searches for X. They don't click on anything. They change their search to Y. Now they click on a product. Machine learning can watch that pattern and say, oh, just start showing that product when they search for X, right? Do that automatically because I know statistically from the users who are on my site that this is what they're going to click. And now the product data underneath doesn't matter anymore. Just the behavior of users who are on your site is driving relevance on your site to a degree. So it's an overlay on top that's adding an additional set of signals rather than just improving the data. Improving the data is really important, but what we often find is that For many of our customers, if all they do is focus on improving the data, it's going to be 2 years, 3 years till they're at a point where they feel like they've improved it enough. And inevitably, some new vendor is going to come in, something's going to change, and they're going to go back to square one, and they're still going to be sitting there with bad search that's kind of getting better, right? We often find that if you bring in additional AI algorithms and other things on top, I can get value quicker and as well get benefits for improving my data because that search system is giving analytics on who's using what, who's clicking on what, et cetera, that can let me aim for the low-hanging fruit, as it were, in my data cleanup processes.
Andrew, what do you think? And especially, what's the best practice you might recommend for making sure the data is ready to go across, breaking down any silo, making it truly universal before you take the quantum leap into more of the AI journey here?
It all happens all at once, as Eric is saying. We do these things in tandem. As Rick was saying, getting your data to conform is important. It's hugely important. That's the whole garbage in side of the equation. Understand that we don't get to control the format that users ask for things. If we say, okay, we're going to use double quotes for inches when they say 27-inch monitor, that becomes the source of truth within our catalog, only to find that users may want millimeters. They may want IN period, inches. It comes in all flavors. So while we're gathering this statistical signal data, we can also be looking at that and even offloading that in the background to an LLM to come up with ways to normalize. These are all the different forms that users ask for this particular unit of measurement, and we can normalize it as such. So that's a discovery perspective. And then on the implementation side, you would do that in real time so that you can change the query to match the way you have your formats and increase the matches for boost, for berry, for filter, etc. That's key. The query side, I mean, you've got the index side and then you've got the query side, and the interpretation of what comes in is important. It goes to another level when you need to say, I want to parse the whole query up. I want to know, yes, units of measure had inches, but it also has these other things, people, places, things, amenities, compatibility measurements, all of those things. And knowing that fast enough to get a change to your query and an answer back to the user is a really big challenge. The best models, the large language models that are the smallest, are also the slowest. So background processing as much as you can, gather the information as much as you can so that at runtime you can pull it all together and present it to the user.
One other just note there, one other tweak. The other thing that you can do that ends up being really helpful is you can prompt query suggestions. As a user is typing, you can suggest where you want them to go. So if they start typing 27 double quote, I can suggest 27 inches if all of my data is stored in inches, right? We can't control what they're going to type, but we can push them in certain directions, which is how we've cleaned our data, which can help make this problem less and less and go away. And it can minimize the data curation side, because if I can get 99% of my users to type inches out all the time, or double quote, or whatever we choose, I don't have to put every permutation of that measurement detail in there.
Yes.
I can know that I have a high statistical validity that somebody's going to type it how I want them to type it.
Yeah. That does get to be hard.
Drive outcomes. Sorry, Andrew.
So that does get to be harder when different users have different styles, and you get the one that says, I'm interested in the, and then eventually they get to the 27-inch monitor. Much harder to match that up and identify it without actually parsing the whole thing, which is, that's maybe the next problem we'll have to face.
Yeah, and it is. I refer to that as kind of we're burning the candles at both ends here, right? Not only are we working on improving the data and what we put into the index, but we're also looking at better understanding the query, better understanding synonyms, prompting the user with a better type ahead experience, moving the left navigation to get the most popular filters up to the top, or even suggesting the filters that we want them to start using in a category that we know are extremely important. For monitors, it's size. For laptops, it's hard drive size or onboard memory, and we'll push those up during that discovery process.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some implementations too that large language models being slow, they capture what's been said, and then while the user gets that first set of search results and is looking at it, it then comes back highlighting certain left nav places and said, did you want to filter on this? Did you want to boost on this? Based on what was in the query. That comes after the fact and would show up on the UI a little bit later.
So this topic is resonating with the panel here. I'm sure it's resonating out there with users too. But I want to see if we couldn't switch to what I call my war stories, how's it going, best practice question. And what I mean by that is this. A lot of people, I think, might be overly familiar, even sick to death of hearing the promise of this thing called AI as relates to, personalization, user experience, site search. I mean, we've heard a lot about what this thing can be and what it should be, but what I'd like to kind of talk about here for a minute or two, beginning with you, Eric, is what are the expectations or the outcomes you really want? And generally speaking, can you cite some casework that maybe you've worked on where this is what people have truly done with this? Here's the expectations they had, and more importantly, here's the results they had at the end after kind of going through their version of putting in this kind of solution. So I think more stories to share, and more importantly, best practice advice to share too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell two different war stories for two different kind of domains, the pre-purchase and post-purchase sides of B2B commerce, right? So this first is going to be a large retailer. This is actually B2C, not B2B, but the same piece applies, right? This is a top 25 US e-commerce retailer, right? They had come to us a few years ago and said, hey, we need you to make our search better, right? And we looked at what they had, and we said, you know what? We can make this good. We can't make it great without you spending a lot of money that you're not going to be willing to spend, right? If you want a shortcut, you need to buy a platform and make this better. And so when we were looking at this retailer, they had 14,000 rules in their system, right? At that point, it was spaghetti code all over the fact of, well, misspelling, then triggered this thing, then triggered that thing, and nobody could figure out how it was getting the answers that it was giving because there's so many different rules coming in, right? And so we implemented the new system with them. When they went live with it, this is an AI-empowered system, and this isn't Gen AI or anything. This is traditional statistical modeling, right? Where behind the scenes, I'm generating query suggestions. I'm using signals to boost and bias and adjust relevancy, right? They went live, and they generated upwards of, double-digit percentages, upwards of 10% conversion increase year one on this go live, right? The story that really resonated with me here is we actually accidentally went live on Black Friday one year. Their current search system had fallen out from under it. It was broken, and they said, this new one's ready. It can't be worse. Just bring it live. And so my team got a call at 3 a.m. and said, we're going live to billions of users. And it's like, oh, great. This is fun, right? The next year, they came back, and it was Black Friday. It was 2 p.m. Black Friday, and got an email from their EVP of e-commerce saying, we've got a problem. And I thought, oh, good. My Thanksgiving's ruined. Like, try to deal with this. And the problem was, it's 2 p.m. on Black Friday, and our Cyber 5 revenue is already more than last year. Our numbers are going to be way higher next year, right? And that was largely attributed to the fact that they were able to give the proper answers for their users, and they were able to look at what a user's intent was, as well as what the intent of their organization was, and sell the appropriate products or show the appropriate products accordingly. This was before Gen AI. This was just signals-based, statistical-based AI that they were driving, right? Now, if we bring this into the Gen AI world, this is going to be the post-purchase side. So my team does work with one of the largest software shops in the world. They have thousands of products, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers, et cetera. We've worked with them a whole lot in integrating Gen AI into their post-purchase support experience, right? There's an integration that we've done where when you're going to submit a case with this organization, you're typing in your case and saying what you're looking for. And what's happening is while you're typing it in the background, we're sending all of that context, the question, what products you own, the title, all of this information to the essentially to the backend Gen AI models. And before you can submit that case, it goes to a new window where generative AI has generated an answer to solve that case that you just put there, using all of their backend knowledge and information behind the scenes. They get a 31% case deflection rate out of that, right? 31% of cases that are about to be created at the time of creation are never created. That is a gigantic amount of value for this organization that has to employ thousands and thousands of people to handle orders, technical problems, everything else under the sun to solve it, because now I have 30% less work coming in effectively, right? And as we dig into why this is happening, it's not just that we're summarizing on search results page, that we're doing that as well. A lot of times when people are opening support cases, they're not doing any work beforehand to try to solve it themselves. They're saying, yeah, this is a problem. I'm just going to call and get somebody else to solve this for me. And then when they're done, I'll solve it. They're not looking. We're forcing them to look at an answer beforehand. And so much of the time, that's actually a useful answer that they don't create the case in the first place.
Rick,
Right?
let's bring you in here, which is, what does success look like from maybe something that you can talk about that you've tackled at CDW on this topic?
Sure. Yeah, there are a couple of great examples, and I think I definitely don't miss the Black Friday days from hearing Eric's. Back when I was at Sears and Crate and Barrel, we had those kind of stories all the time. B2B world, it's a little better. But you know, we've done a couple of hackathons where we'll take our development teams and give them a couple of weeks breathing space to go look for opportunities within CDW. And I think a couple of great things that have come out of that is this need for kind of a chat agent before we hand it over to a real life person. We're just testing that now, but we're seeing about a 50% sort of retention rate of being able to solve that customer's problem before we hand that off to one of our experts, which is really great. Another case, we've got Microsoft is getting ready for the Windows 11 release, and you need a certain set of hardware in order to support Windows 11. And we've actually been able to go through our customers' hardware and identify which of those are eligible for a Windows 11 upgrade and which are not, and which products they may need to put out to pasture and get new laptops in order to run Windows 11. So it's those unique cases. There's not one thing where we're trying to, boil the ocean, but we're looking for these kind of specific problems where we can use Gen AI to get there faster for our customers. So
I'll throw in a quick little war story, and without naming any names, one of my neighbors works in B2B e-com for a major sports apparel manufacturer, and he was just jetted out to the home office for their first ever kind of e-commerce hackathon, and it was all about this stuff here: product discovery, site search, user personalization, AI, all this stuff. And so all their teams got together. I said, what are you guys going to do? Oh, we're going to do personalization. I said, okay. Yeah, we think it's a great thing, this personalization thing. My point was, well, I think a lot of other manufacturers got the memo like maybe 15 years ago, but good luck. So it just goes to show, how big and how fragmented all of this can be, depending upon what you're talking about from a technology perspective. And with that, I want to pivot back to Andrew to kind of ask you, we've heard some pretty good stories here from Eric and Rick, but Andrew, from a technical perspective, just in general, what should success look like? I mean, technically, what should your house in order be in to be successful at this kind of new application? What are your thoughts on that, do you think?
Well, ultimately, the success is in that uplift from query. That's what you measure at the far end. But as Eric pointed out, it means your staff is not as busy answering questions if you have a support capability that may be in there. It may also mean that your team of search experts can spend less time figuring out data issues and more time being search experts, more time understanding their users, more time looking at their signals to see the personalization trends. So success can come in a lot of places. Ultimately, it builds to a better product, a faster product, a less maintenance needed product. So we look for any of the places where we can improve, where we can automate, where we can better understand the data. For example, if you are if you service highly technical users, we do have customers that maybe they sell the components for the motherboards and all the things CDW is selling. It's the electrical engineers that want the different components and to put together to make those things. Well, if that's your user base and you've got good documentation on the different components, the chipsets, the motherboards, the etc. that's out there, you can take that information. Once you take a query, grab the relevant pieces, put it all into an LLM, and make a very expert-focused chat where they can talk about compatibility, where they can talk about, vibration and shock stress measurements that, will this withstand a drop from this far? Will this withstand vibration or heat? Does it conform to ANSI specification XYZ? All of those questions can be asked of the product before they finally approach you and say, I'm interested in this one and that one. I want the pros and cons, and is it compatible with my other thing, right? They can do so much of that expert level question answer if you can lump together the good documentation you've got and get it to an LLM and make those correlations. Another one is, I talked about it before, the query parsing. It doesn't have to be units of measure or units of measure in the sense of inches and feet and watts and angstroms. It can be date ranges. It can be price preferences. It can be types of amenities in the hospitality business, right? Things about menus that you want, preferences that you have, or even a real-time, I know I'm traveling to a location, tell me the hotel that is nearest to the activity that I like. And that's a very good question you can ask a large language model to get tailored information back about, here's the hiking in the area, here are the places that are most popular. If you like sunsets, you can go look here. All of that comes together and gets presented to the user.
I'll tell you what, we'll make it our secret, but if you want my neighbor's number, I'll pass it along to you folks. They could use a little help, I think. So, Rick, let's pivot back to you. Once again, IT buyers, I have always thought to be kind of the bellwether, early adopters, early user for how other audiences out there tend to use all of the things that are new and bold and aggressive and innovative with anything commerce enabled for technology. So having said all that, I want to talk about the complexity of a B2B purchase and how personalization, product discovery, AI-driven site search contributes to that, because I do a lot of research on this stuff and other people do a lot of research on this stuff. And the bottom line is that buyer doesn't care. They're rooted at home in the expectations they've had for all these years on doing any kind of B2C purchase. And the thing is, they want that on the B2B side. Now, of course, that's an enormous challenge for a B2B seller of sorts. But you know what? I got to tell you, more and more B2B buyers, they're very demanding. If they don't see or they don't get what they want, they're not even gonna. You're out of the plate. You're just out. Maybe before you get going. So, I want to address the complexity issue. How do you make B2B complexity better, simpler, faster, easier? When it comes to our three topics here: discovery, personalization, and AI-assisted faster search. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, first at CDW, we're very lucky to have, 6,000 sellers that are in front of our customers that are answering questions like that. But we want to make their lives easier, and we want to offload some of that so that it can be, self-service on our CDW website. And so within personalization, right now we're working on pushing up previously purchased items, bundled items, so that, you know, our customer can go, hey, I've got another new employee. I just need to go on the site and order another laptop, monitor, keyboard set and have it delivered, rather than calling their seller and say, you know, send me another new employee package. We are starting to anticipate our customers searching for things that are, you know, a good travel laptop. Well, what does that mean for travel laptop? It means probably lightweight. Maybe it's a little bit smaller. Maybe it has great battery life for travel. All of those things. So, you know, those are some of the things I think that are going to make us different, and the customer is going to appreciate. I was even having a conversation this morning. We do a lot of work with Apple. We do a lot of work with Microsoft. How can we know our customers and what their preference is? Is their preference to buy Dell laptops for all 20,000 of their employees? Then it probably doesn't make much sense for us to, you know, talk about the Apple laptops on the homepage, and rather we could tailor something specific to them. So I think we're getting smarter at it. Again, we're going in sort of cautiously optimistic and solving one of these problems at a time, you know, using Gen AI and other technologies.
So Andrew, from kind of a technical perspective, I mean, complexity, I think, is just part and parcel of any kind of B2B purchase, depending upon the vertical you're in or the product you're looking for. But are there some general rules of thumb or best practices that you should look at when trying to take, you know, product discovery, personalization, AI-driven search to making it simpler to kind of make a complex purchase that more transparent, easier to do? What do you think?
I'm shooting from the hip here because most of the time I'm more tightly focused on R&D efforts, right? So I'm trying to think bigger here. I would say when complexity, a human mind can only handle a certain amount of complexity, and you've got to funnel that down and help them make the decisions they need so that they can keep in their mind the various things they want. They don't want to deal with across the board complexities. You've got to reduce it. It's a combination of UX. It's a combination of guiding them through the funnel. It's a combination of keeping track what they've already told you and guessing at what they need at the next step, right? We've all been on hold, punched in our identification in the wait system, only to have the first question asked us is to repeat all of that stuff. Well, anything that you can gather through that process, associate it with the user, put it into personalization, boosting so that the selections and the next choice is already what they want, or your best guess at what they want, is going to be a step forward.
Okay, so Eric, let's give you the last word on this one. And we're talking about, you know, basically B2B, you know, complexity when it comes to purchasing. So what are some specific strategies that can be employed by a B2B organization of any size to make this complexity that much easier for their customer using, you know, better AI site search, personalization, discovery, the whole toolbox we're talking about here? What do you think?
So the biggest thing, and this will be summarizing a little bit of what Rick and Andrew are saying, biggest thing is being proactive, right? You've got complexity. If you can proactively solve that complexity, you give a better experience for the user, right? So if I can show you on the search result cards, you bought this last on this day, right? Or I can show you, I think, some of the large B2B healthcare distributors, right? Of the products you're getting, here's all of your contracts, right? Check to see the pricing on your individual contracts, and we'll have a thing about how much money till the next discount level or whatever on that contract, right? There's huge amount of complexities in all parts, even just the contracting. If you have fitment, that becomes a huge piece of reducing complexity here, because I can check this works on my vehicle or device or what have you to make sure that this works appropriately. And then Rick brought up bundling, right? Complete the job is typically a term that we'll use here, is, you know, if I'm going to buy a new CPU for my computer, I maybe need a heat sink. I maybe need thermal paste. I maybe need a screwdriver to put it in. I need some amount of information to complete this accordingly. And we can proactively combine that and give that to them based on both data underneath as well as statistical analysis about what do people normally buy together at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, our job here is to reduce the friction however possible for someone to give us money. Right? That's ultimately the name of the game, is we're looking for them to add it to the cart and check it out. If I can reduce the friction in them doing that, that's even better. And this comes in with recommendations as well. For a lot of businesses, B2B businesses, they're buying consumables. Maybe it's food, maybe it's medicine, maybe it's something else. I can build statistical machine learning models that look at how frequently do you reorder different products. And I can make my homepage add to your cart, or we think you want to buy this now, where with one click, they can add 10 things into their cart based on how frequently they buy these things over and over. And so now they're not going from finding and adding to cart, they're going from removing these things I may not need in this specific scenario, right? That's net better for my business because I'm defaulting to selling it rather than defaulting to you have to find it. It's better for the customer because they don't have to do as much work.
So we could spend literally hours on this topic because there's just that much to delve into and that much good advice coming out of our panel here. But we have time for one more question. So let's go with our last question here. Rick, we'll start with you. Eric, we're going to pivot with you, and then Andrew, why don't you kind of bring us home? But here's our final question for the day, which is, what emerging search technologies, particularly in natural language processing and machine learning, show the most promise for enhancing product discovery in a B2B environment? So I kind of like this one because we're kind of foreshadowing what is to come. So Rick, let's start with you. That's what's your take on the horizon of what we just talked about there?
Yeah, I think we've touched on sort of natural language processing and understanding the intent of the customer's query, and that's next up on our roadmap. And we've spent some time with large language models, both internal and external, to see if we can do that. Can we pick apart those phrases, those concepts, and really understand, something is a unit of measure that we could filter for as an attribute, something is a category that we could filter for. Again, removing the friction. Why make a customer see a big set of results and then choose a category and then choose an attribute and then choose a brand when they've maybe told us all of that in their query, right? And so if we can interpret that correctly and apply those filters for them and get them down to a meaningful set of, instead of 300 results, 30 results, I think that's sort of where the magic happens.
All right, Eric, do you want the question again, or do you basically, the summation is what kind of technology you think is going to foreshadow to make this much easier going forward, even more easier?
I think there's two areas that I see fundamentally right now starting to drive gains. One is here, one is coming. The one that's here is semantic search. So the ability to search by concepts, not just keywords, right? The most obvious use case of this that I know Lucidworks does with kind of the never null capability is, if you search for something I don't have, but I can understand the concept of what that is, let me show you what I do have, right? You search for the brand Kleenex. I don't sell Kleenex. I sell puffs. Let me show you puffs, right? In previous years, that was, oh, don't have that. Sorry, no results page. Now it's, I know what problem you're looking to solve. Let me give that answer. So that is here, but it's not in use everywhere yet, right? Huge number of B2B sites are still using keyword-only search indexes. Semantic is relatively straightforward and easy to implement these days and should be considered. The future one that I see that's really coming is, I think the entire industry as a whole has been trying to figure out how to start using large language models more and more in commerce, not necessarily on the product metadata improvement side, but on the actual query side, right? Where I'm starting to see a lot of advancements here is in large language models and systems' ability to create prompts that leverage user context within it in order to go to the large language model. where my prompt isn't just necessarily using context to filter for the right data back, but saying, oh, by the way, this person just bought a Windows laptop. Now they're looking for antivirus software. They're on Windows 11 on this version, and they have this much hard drive and RAM, and here's the company for it. Here's the typical one they use. And now large language will generate an answer using that context to say, for you, because you're at this organization and you typically use McAfee, antivirus, we recommend you use McAfee antivirus so as not to get in trouble with your IT, right? Like, you can start doing a lot better generated answering in more of a concierge selling sort of manner if I can start bringing that context into the generation level of the LLM. And we're starting to see the initial experiments of that happening right now. And I think in the next couple of years, it's really going to take off.
All right, and Andrew, why don't you bring us home here? Technically speaking, what are some of the futuristic applications that you folks are keeping an eye on? Because you're kind of into the business of development of these kinds of things. So what's on the drawing board from your perspective that you want to maybe kind of wrap us up with?
Okay. Well, first I want to reiterate or echo what Rick and Eric have said. These are both very good points. When we think about a legacy lexical search, we often think of it versus semantic, or will it be LLM? And we start to think this or that or the other. Lexical is better than semantic at some things, and semantic is better than lexical at some things. So it's not always good to think about this as a replacement. I'm just going to say that as the big one. But everything else is, I love it. I love what I'm hearing here. Now, let me back up a little bit and pivot. One of the technologies that I see a lot of promise in is focused at a very key problem that we face in the LLM adoption life cycle that we're facing right now. If you do retail search of any kind, you care about how long it takes to run a query. And if you want your query response to come back in hundreds of milliseconds range, and the fastest LLM is going to give you seconds range, you can't use an LLM as your main search. Now, eventually, we'll probably get there, right? Things get better, stronger, faster as we move forward. One way I can see of bridging that gap is what we call a small language model. Large language model basically trains its understanding of language and the world off the whole internet. You take a small language model, you take a subset of that internet that's a domain that you care about the most, and you train a highly focused model. It can still make the inferences that a large language model can make, and it has advantages over a straight semantic model in that it can understand when you don't want something a little better. That's, by the way, just one of the deficiencies, because to say you don't want X, you just said X, and the language model is going to grab that and say, X, I've got a match, and we run into problems. But with a small language model, we can say, okay, I'm going to focus this small language model. One that I've been working on in hospitality is looking for the query parsing elements that I spoke of earlier. I want to know what the amenities are. When I see an amenity, what's the representation in my catalog for that amenity? Because some people are going to say they want pet friendly, and others are going to say, bring my dog, right? And we have to search for it against the catalog with the way we say it. Same thing can be done to figure out that parsing of the units of measure or broad categorization of a user, the type of user. Some users know what they care about. I want a 2024 Lenovo laptop with a, whatever CPU, and others are coming with broad-based research questions. Well, they're going to ask different kinds of questions. If we can figure out what kind of user experience they're looking for, we can route them to the LLM heavy, slower, but very in-depth query experience versus give them the traditional pages of results and have them pick, the best one that matches what they're thinking. Small language models, it can offer the speed of a semantic model with the inference capability, a good part of the inference capability of a large language model. So
I like that. Think big on small. Kind of put a different twist on it. Well, I got to tell you, this has been an illuminating and fascinating and detailed and practical discussion with a lot of great takeaways. So Eric, thank you. Rick, thank you. And Andrew, thank you. And that is the conclusion of today's webinar. So thank you for joining us today. There'll be a replay of this webinar available. After you conclude, you'll see a pop-up window on your screen asking to provide some feedback. And yeah, I know everybody's being hit with feedback, but you know what? Your feedback helps us determine the topics that are going to help you do all of this better, faster, cheaper. So please, give us a response. We'd appreciate that. And with that, thank you once again for everybody's participation. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.
hey, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.